All right, Josh, the dust has settled.
Yeah.
The 2025 class has got a nice little bow on it. Finished through the line as we did.
Cherry on top.
It was
dotted I's. We've crossed the T's.
all of it.
We're across the finish line. Name another cliche. We've done it.
It's
in
all done.
2025.
Let's just kind of, for those that are maybe not as dialed in year round, like they just watch what happens on Saturday, let's sort of take a 30,000-foot view and do the spark notes of what National Signing Day in this 2025 cycle was. Sound good to
Yeah.
you? Let's do it. Let's take a look at these rankings, man, because at number 1, the Texas Longhorns. Georgia at 2, Bama at 3. A lot of the usual suspects filling out this top 10. Michigan at 6, just hanging out there. A team that doesn't necessarily routinely recruit in the top 10, but Sharon Moore has got some other plans. Let's start with Texas, though, man, because with them being number 1 in America and then seeing the Georgia logo and the Bama logo underneath them, just gives a certain vibe to it that Steve Sarkisian, what he's building out there. We said it on the show. I feel like he's genuinely built a roster now that has staying power in the SEC. What do you make of this number 1 class? How big a deal is that?
I think it's a huge deal because throughout the entire cycle, the experts on 3, anywhere, everybody was penciling in Georgia. Georgia's going to end up finishing number 1. Even when they were sitting at 3 or 4, the entire cycle, everybody expected Georgia to finish number 1. Well, Texas does it, and how do they do it? They do it by going into the state of Georgia and landing defensive lineman Justice Terry. Of course, there's more to it, but in the end, I believe if Justice Terry inks with the Dogs, technically they're the number 1 team. Instead, he's at Texas. And yes, there's plenty of other wins for the Longhorns, but I think that is the one. When we talk about how did they finish number 1, well, I mean, they went out on the field and they had a great season, and that goes a long way. But landing Justice Terry, one of the best players in the state of Georgia, really helped the Horns down the stretch.
So Texas finishes on top. You got Georgia at 2. Georgia, there was this feeling during the season with the word I would use to describe it is a hectic season, kind of hectic optically, and Georgia doesn't win the national championship, and they don't accomplish their ultimate goal in that sense. But Georgia comes in at number 2, and Kirby Smart's not going anywhere. Still right. 2 elite defensive linemen at the top of the class. You got 2 pass catchers. What do you make of the Dogs?
You look at what Georgia can do, and even when they struggle, they can spin that because Georgia plays freshmen, and they play anybody that can come in and get it done. So they go out and they sign a bunch of number 1 players at their position who I think are going to contribute right away. That only helps fuel recruiting too, because other high school players see that, hey, Georgia, even though they're one of the best teams in the country, they're playing freshmen in key roles. We saw it with KJ Boulder. We've seen it with others. I think Isaiah Gibson coming off the edge, Xavier Griffin on the defensive line, Talon Taylor at wide receiver out of Illinois, 5-star. These are guys that we're going to see. Well, we're going to see them in the spring first.
Yeah, which I can't wait for. That's one of the best parts once you get through the line of finishing out, the 2025 cycle is, okay, now we think about, we'll see these dudes in spring practice wearing their uniforms, not for a photo shoot this time.
No.
They're running routes on air, some team drills, the spring game, all that. But Georgia going and getting some real weapons on offense.
Yeah.
I think if you're a Georgia fan, you watch what happened last year and what you seem to be wanting to do offensively, which is throw the gosh darn football. Getting dudes they're going to catch it and do something with it afterwards, I mean, good vibes.
Yeah.
Alabama at 3. I don't want to go through this entire top 10, but Alabama at 3 is noteworthy. Kalen DeBoer, they say, hey, you got big shoes to fill. Now, Nick Saban, not the tallest guy in the world, but still big shoes to fill.
Yeah.
I don't know what size, but big shoes being the GOAT. So Kalen DeBoer, the question is, hey, can he recruit?
There's only one man on earth right now that has walked a mile in Nick Saban shoes. And that's Kalen DeBoer. And he finished number 3 in his first full cycle in Tuscaloosa. What a finish, because, JD, a year ago today, they were just trying to get their bearings.
Yeah.
I mean, you lose Caleb Downs, you lose Julian Sayin, you lose your head coach, you lose all these things. Kalen DeBoer comes in from Washington. They wonder, does he even know how to get around on the highways in the South, let alone recruit the South? And here they are with the number 3 class in America, and they did it. They did it in the South, but they also did it out west in California as well. Really impressive.
The thing I'm trying to square about Bama, I'd be curious to get your take on this. How much of this class in your mind is, hey, Kalen DeBoer is hitting the trail and they're maximizing relationships and all that? Or in addition to that, is it like, yeah, DeBoer's great, however, see that script A, you walk into the high school, that's going to move the needle a little bit as well. Is it more DeBoer, the brand, or some combination? Who do you give the credit to, I guess, is my question.
I give the credit to the machine that is Alabama football, but I give Kalen DeBoer credit for knowing how to drive that machine.
Yeah.
Not everybody knows how to drive the machine.
That's a good way to say it.
But he did. And, you know, you can't discredit everything that Alabama is and was over the last 100 years and say that Kalen DeBoer did a great job. Kalen DeBoer knew how to come in and drive that machine.
And the thing that's interesting about where Alabama is right now is last year you only win 9 games, which most schools would give their left arm and a kicker to win 9 games. Alabama's like down year. Can't have it happen. And it is below expectations there. But I think what's interesting now is for Kalen DeBoer, after year 1, when he hits the trail, for 2026, it's not going to be the same benefit of the doubt of, well, Bama's still Bama, they made the playoff. It's like, no, Bama's trying to get up off the mat now. So how they hit the trail going forward, I think we're going to learn a lot about them. So that's the top 3. Who else here in this group of the top 10 from an Oregon to Ohio State and Michigan? We'll talk about Michigan in a little bit, I guess. But is anybody in general that you want to make sure we touch on here to give the good folks a little bit of a highlight of what National Signing Day and this 2025 cycle was?
Well, I think if you say we're going to talk about Michigan, I'll hold off on Michigan.
Okay.
But Michigan was the only team that made a big move today. They landed the number 48 player in the country, Ty Haywood, this morning at around 8 a.m. Central Time, and he is from Texas. He was committed to Alabama, opened things back up in December, and signs with Michigan. They go from number 9 to number 6. And we're going to talk about it, but Michigan just has a ton of momentum coming out of the 2025 cycle. But also, look at LSU. They were a top 5 program for a long time. After losing Bryce Underwood, they keep things tight. They don't lose DJ Pickett like a lot of people thought they would, and they finish solidly inside the top 10. And then you look, even a little bit lower, some of these teams that were battling to get into the top 10, like Florida, Notre Dame, Miami, those 3 teams, I think, if you look at their class, they have as good of a class top to bottom as anybody in the top 10. But, JD, there's only 10 teams in the top 10. You can't put 13 in there. So, I think it was a great signing day, really, for a lot of programs here. But when we talk about who has the momentum right now, I think it's Michigan. And I think it's the Florida Gators. Yeah. I know, of course, Ohio State, anybody that wins the national championship is going to have momentum into the next year. But for 2 programs that they didn't necessarily gain that traction on the field. Good seasons. Yeah. Not great seasons. Yeah. But they are hitting the trail in 2026 with a ton of momentum.
And the thing that's interesting about Florida is, they finished with a 7-5 record in the regular season. They win their bowl game. I'm sitting here saying, if I'm a Florida fan, okay, won 8 games, finish, in top 10 or right around the top 10, I suppose. What could we do if we won 9 games? Could we break into that top 10 and even near the top 5?
For sure, because it's where they're coming from. Like, a 9-win season is not up to the Florida Gators standard, but it shows that Billy Napier is no longer a coach under question, right? Mm-hmm. If they go out and they win 9 games this season, building off of what they've done, it shows recruits the trajectory of the program, and that's what recruiting is really about.
And we're also recording this after we just did our National Signing Day show, where you were driving the bus for right around 2 hours. So that voice is just pushing through. Pushing through.
We got it, though. We got it. We're good.
So Florida comes in at number 11, again, just on the edge of the top 10. We've danced around it. Dude, Michigan feels like the story of the cycle. They flip Bryce Underwood. They jump up to 6 today. Like, they've always been this team that, not to say do more with less, because that sounds like we're discounting what they have on the roster, but they're usually, I say usually, loosely, they're a team that you kind of expect to be in the teens and develop really well, and then the guys that's a 3-star, they end up being 5 stars on the field once they're juniors. Now they have better raw ingredients under Sharon Moore. This feels to me like a Michigan 2.0 under him. What do you make of this class and what they're going to be in the future here?
Numbers don't lie. And I watch our numbers on the On3 Recruits channel. If you're not subscribed to the On3 Recruits channel, what are you doing? But I watch our numbers, and I would say really the entire cycle with Michigan, there was not a lot of interest in Michigan recruiting. Maybe apathy is the word to use here. And that all changed. All of a sudden, Michigan rumors start swirling in November that Bryce Underwood could be in play. Well, Bryce Underwood flips about 3 weeks later, and now when we post a Michigan recruiting video, they go crazy. The Michigan fans are all in. They can feel it too. Like, it's not just a number on the rankings. The Michigan fans understand what happened. They understand there's been a seismic shift, not just a change in strategy, but there's been a seismic shift in the way Michigan approaches recruiting, and you listen to the experts, it's not changing.
No.
It's not going anywhere. This wasn't a one-off. This wasn't a situation where they said, hey, let's break the bank and let's really use all of our resources on Bryce Underwood. This is a situation where this is going to occur over and over, and we're going to hear Michigan involved with 5-star players moving forward.
And Steve Wiltfong said this on the National Signing Day show. He's like, Michigan is not going to lose on the NIL front anymore. Like
unless they want to.
Unless they want to.
Unless they feel like somebody, hey, we're going to cap this out right here. Unless they want to.
But being willing to play ball at that level in the new age of college football
Michigan
and what
fans
recruiting
gotta love
is,
that.
I mean, holy smokes, you got to be fired up if you're a Michigan fan.
It went from, we recruit, but we develop, to we recruit and we develop.
Which is scary for the rest of college football.
Because the development part's not going to stop.
It shouldn't. I don't see why it would.
I don't see why
I
it
guess
would.
some pieces have left, but I mean, Sharon Moore, he's still from that tree.
Right.
He still was around for that national title
And
run.
it worked.
So
It worked for them. But now let's raise the floor of what these players can do physically, and now let's see how they develop.
And you churn out, you would imagine a better product, and I'm very excited to see what it looks like going forward. I, again, expect Bryce Underwood to be the guy. Game 1 for the Michigan Wolverines. Ohio State at 5. National champs, got to at least mention them. Phenomenal recruiting class. Land their quarterback in Tavian St. Clair.
That's the real interesting one right there. Tavian St. Clair. You
Stay
hold
committed.
on to Devin Sanchez. They go into Houston, Texas to land the number 1 corner in the country. And you never heard a peep from Devin Sanchez after he committed. They do a phenomenal job of holding on to him. Quincy Porter is Brian Hartline's next impact freshman, 6'3.5", 200 pounds out of New Jersey, number 3 wide receiver in America. They go into the state of Texas again and land Riley Pettijohn, an elite linebacker. Another one from McKinney, Texas that the Longhorns wanted, but after he committed to Ohio State, it was over. So while Ohio State fans might be a little upset about losing Naeem Offord at the last minute, one of the top corners in the country, this is a phenomenal class.
And I get that every school we're talking about here is a quote-unquote big-time program, but I have to imagine the momentum around Ohio State on the field winning a national championship, and just also when you get out there for a game, like we've been lucky enough to be there for a couple, and you walk out on that field, it feels like a production. It feels like you are classic college football, and you're walking into that like painting, if you will, of what the shoe is. So no surprise, Ohio State recruiting well. One team I want to talk about as we wrap this up here, Josh. Oregon, even just being in the mix for one of your commitments or one of the guys that you're after, when it comes to National Signing Day, they close as well as anybody else in America. Sitting there number 4, Ducks don't look like they are going to take any step backwards under Dan Lanning.
No, the Ducks did a phenomenal job of filling holes in their secondary, also bringing in a great tight end class. I think that's vitally important to what Oregon wants to do, some versatile pass-catching tight ends, flipping Naeem Offord, adding Zaire Addison, a 6'4", 285-pound offensive tackle from Florida, going into the state of Florida, 3,000 miles away, not to land a wide receiver DB, but one of the best offensive tackles in the state. Oregon just did a phenomenal job across the board of filling needs, getting players that are going to be dynamic skill players, but also, like I said, getting in the trenches and finding some real talent.
I'm glad you emphasized the state of Florida there, because I appreciate what the state of Oregon is. I have family that lives in the state of Oregon. There's not a lot of ballers that play high school football in the state of Oregon. So if you want to go recruit in the top 5 level, you got to kick some doors down, go to Florida, go to Texas and land Corey Moore, go to Ohio and land a Trey McNutt. Like what they're doing nationally.
You got to be national. You got to be national.
Massively impressive. And I don't think it's just NIL. You can have NIL, and I'm sure that plays a factor. But Dan Lanning, by nature of this class, again being in the top 10, dude is a dog on the recruiting trail.
They went into Alabama and landed the number 1 player in Alabama. Like, we all were watching Naeem Offord committed at Ohio State down the end, and it's not surprising to me that he flipped. It's surprising to me that the number 1 player in the state of Alabama flipped on signing day to Oregon. It's not a program in the state of Alabama.
I remember sitting here at the desk with you, and off to our right, I guess your left if you're watching via YouTube, you got Chad Simmons and Steve Wiltfong on National Signing Day, the early signing period, both working phones, taking phone calls. You could tell, like, something's about to
go down.
Something's about to go down. And
we were just waiting for them to raise their hand to say, I got intel. And
boy,
did they.
Yeah, that intel and then some when it comes to that whole story. Well, Josh, hopefully get some sleep here. Get some fluids for the throat and get rested up for 2026. I know you're already getting after it there.
But we've been turned the page.
I was going to say.
It's been turned.
You've been on the run here for 26.
Yeah.
But, man.
Yeah, we're getting after it.
Appreciate all your time. National recruiting analyst for On 3, host of the Inside Scoop. Also host the Wilt Fun Whip Around with Steve Wilt, the On 3 Recruits channel. If you're not yet subscribed and dialed in, do that right now. Recruiting year-round, and we are on to 2026.